Okay, welcome to GPC. We are about to put sound into our games. This is going to be using a little library that I made rather, called Tone Fire. And its purpose is basically to abstract away all the complicated FMOD stuff so that you guys can put sound to your games. Because unfortunately, sound is not a requirement for first year games. And there's an obvious reason why. There's no sound course in first year, so how can they, expect you to have sound in your game when they've never taught you how to do it? And then that's where this session comes in. Because if your game doesn't have sound, it's gonna suck. And I'm sorry, but that's just the reality. Now, why is it called Tone Fire? Okay, so originally this was gonna be this name of this project belonged to a different project. It was called Tone Fire because my name on GitHub and pretty much everything is Prometheus, and Prometheus is the Titan of fire, and the tone because of music. And I was gonna make like a Node programming based DAW, digital audio workspace, and I wanted to call it Tone Fire. Didn't end up doing that, and then it became this. Alright, so let's jump into C++. Now this is a little engine that I cooked up yesterday, or day before, and it's pretty simple. It should be pretty familiar to you guys. It's got like a little basic scene setup. It's not using any super fancy entity component system. Oh, yeah, I should probably share my screen. Thank you. Alright, I'll give you guys a second to join up. Yeah, we'll get to the color scheme in the gamer later, if we have time. Okay. I'm gonna move on in a couple seconds here. Yeah, I can zoom in. The code right now is not super important, but yeah. Yes, set an input. Coined from GDW. Alright, let's get into it. So, this is a little engine that I made a couple of days ago. It shouldn't be too alien to you guys. There's no fancy entity component system, but it's basically, you got your there's like an update for the scene, and the scene has like an initialize, and it can have members like this. This is the gamer class, and I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, I've made this so that you guys can put this into your C++ projects. And this is generally how most C++ projects are set up in terms of file structure. I'll get into more on that in a little bit again. But let's talk about what's going on here. So to kind of help us speed along a little bit, I have done a little bit of stuff ahead of time. Now this doesn't have to do with, Tone Fire itself. This is a different thing. So I will explain what's going on. So we got the gamer here, right? And the gamer is basically this wrapper for a gamepad manager. And the gamepad manager is a library. You can see this little macro I made called DLL. It's another library that I've imported and linked and all that already, just so that you can kind of get a sense okay, this is how it works, and I can talk you through the process. Again, here's the part where it doesn't run because I'm showing people. Yep. Oh yeah, okay. I'll go release mode. So it's pretty simple. All this does is if I have a controller plugged in, it's simply going to say, or it's going to print out hi. Let me just quickly plug in my controller. And this isn't like super completely necessary for the session, but I just wanted to show this. And I wanted to show this also because like it's important to note the modularity of libraries like these. Basically, a lot of the things that you're going to be pulling from are going to be libraries like this, whether they're static or dynamic, or a mix of both. And it's really important that you learn this particular set of skills. So with that, bear with me here as we start the actual integrating process of Tone Fire. And actually, before I do that, before I forget, let's show you guys the end product. So what are we trying to do here? Well, we're trying to put sound into our games, right? Now, what does that look like? Well, this is it. This is all you need to do to use Tone Fire. You have your FMOD core here, which is the underlying audio engine, and you stick the update in your game update or your game loop, whatever part of your engine or framework or game that updates every frame, the render loop, etc. That's where you put it. And with some simple setup, you can actually test out sounds and stuff like that by just typing the name and putting in what kind of sound you want it to be. And there's another constructor for this, but again, I'll go over that stuff later. So if I run this, it should work, but I'm showing people, so maybe not. Okay, cool. So you guys can't hear this. Quick warning, I'm going to switch to the window, so there's going to be some audio. It might be a bit loud. So, as you guys can probably hear, it's playing music. That's a little thing I wrote for a mobile game that I made last semester. Good jam. Now, it's cool because this is all you need. Like if I take this out, this is all you need to be able to run Tone Fire after you have it set up. Yeah, Cash Money Man. That's what it's called. Now let's get into how to actually set it up. So we're gonna want to go ahead and download the debug mode build. And I've already done that, so I'm not going to do it again, but it's in my downloads. So I'm going to actually take this and I'm going to cut and paste. Where are we? Okay, we're going to paste it into here for now. So let's open this up. What's in here? We got an include and a lib. Now, generally, when you set up your projects, they have a couple of different directories that you manually set up. Yes, it's WinRAR. And so that's what we're going to be kind of setting up and doing together. Because I'm not sure if you guys have gone over how to do this, but now you will know, regardless. Okay. Yeah, we'll get to that part later. All right. First things first, you're going to open up your, you're going to right click on your project and you're going to open up properties. And you're going to go to C++ here and you're going to click general. And you're going to do /include. So this is the first part of our library. You'll notice that, you know, I have all of these files here from my gamepad manager actually in the project. Now, if we didn't have these header files, the gamer wouldn't know what a gamepad manager is or anything like that. And if it doesn't know what it is, it can't use it. If it doesn't know where it is, it can't use it. So that's one of the most crucial parts, is these basically give you the headers. Obviously they're headers for what you're going to be using. So this is part one, very important. So let's take a look at this again. Or did I just click PowerShell? Okay, properties. So yeah, C++ general /include. So when it comes to Visual Studio and the executable, Visual Studio has the working directory by default set to the solution directory, and basically that means that /include routes to here, to this folder. So it's going to look inside this include folder for our additional includes. And we're not changing anything. You know, if you don't have this set up, it's fine. We're only adding on. So if you want to keep your old include set up, you can still do that, but you can have /include as your additional include directory. Now, let's take a second and unzip this. All right, so we have our include folder here, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy these files and paste them. But that doesn't look very nice. So you know what? I'm actually going to make a folder called Tone Fire, and I'm going to drag them in here. Cool. So now we can see that things actually make sense in our setup. So cool, we got it in there, which means that when we go ahead and do this, Tone Fire, it pops up with the appropriate stuff and it works. I can open it, and it'll take a second to not be red underlined, but it works. Cool. Problem, it's still not in our project. I don't know if you guys are using file setup or filter setup. I'm using file setup. So I'm going to add a new filter here, and I'm going to call it Tone Fire. So just like before with the gamepad manager, we want to add our headers into here. And since Tone Fire is a single header, we only need to add one. So let's go in here, add that. So now this will be a part of the compilation, which means that we can properly access the definitions and all that jazz, which is bueno. Now, if we try and run this, this won't work. And the reason for that is that we have provided the headers, but we have not provided the definitions. So this just thinks that it's any other old file, and all of these are undefined. So how do we define that? Well, that's where our static and dynamic libraries come in. So if we go back to our zip file here, we have this lib folder. Now, I already have it set up again, but I'll show you how to do it. It's pretty simple. And since this is the debug version, yeah, I'll pop that into the debug folder. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to right-click, make a new folder, and call it lib. Open that up. Make two folders called debug and release. Open that up, and then stick the library in the appropriate place. Again, this library specifically is for debug, so you definitely want to put this in the debug. If you put it in release, it's going to be sad and not happy. So again, just make a new folder, call it lib, make two new folders, call them debug and release, and make sure you put it in the right place. So in our case, again, inside debug folder. Now we're going to go in here into our properties again. And we're going to take a look at the linker. So here is where you could use a fancy macro to make your life easier, but I'm not going to, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. So we have our active configurations, debug and release. Right now we're only going to worry about debug. So basically this means when you change this configuration up here, it will change the settings of the properties to change them to what you want them to be. So for us, we want to make sure that when we're in debug mode, it gets the debug library. So to do that, you're going to go to your additional library directories here under linker in general, and you're going to type /lib/debug. And that will look for the library in that place. Again, this is not changing the library directory, this is just adding on another library directory. And again, I'm going to pretend I didn't have this here. So basically, the last step for this, well, kind of, is you want to go into your linker, input and you're gonna go up here to additional dependencies, click this drop down, edit, and if you already have a library here, again, gonna pretend that's not there. If you already have a library here, you can press enter to make an inline. This will automatically separate it for you. And you're gonna type in tone space fire.lib. And you press OK. And that's cool. So you can do that for release as well. And you can also do it at the same time by clicking all configurations. But again, we're only worrying about the debug configuration for this tutorial thing. Cool. So what happens if I try to run it? Well, let's try and use a definition first. FMOD core FMOD, right? I'm going to call default constructor here, and we're going to say fmod.update. So tonefire.dll is missing. This is very important. We have linked the static library, but we have not linked the dynamic library. If you do not have the dynamic library, it will not work. So here's how to do that. Let's go back once again to our zip folder. Now, these are the DLLs that you need. And by the way, lib stands for library, DLL stands for dynamically linked library. And so we're going to take these and we're going to use them to dynamically link. Now, how do we do that? Well, it's pretty simple. You're going to go into your build directory. So in this case, for me, it's x64 debug, and you can see that my exe is right here. But wherever your build directory is, and make sure that it's the right one, make sure it's debug mode and x64, because this will only work for x64, because I only built Tonefire for x64. And you're going to paste them in. And that's it. We've dynamically linked it. If you're interested to know how this works, I will explain later in the session. But for the sake of time and all that, getting the important stuff out of the way first, we're going to consider this good. So what happens now if I try to run it? It works. No problems. So let's try and play a sound then. Yeah, I realize I deleted a folder I wasn't meant to, but anyway. So if we take a quick peek at the fmod core constructor, we can see that the default path for our sounds is going to be /assets/sounds. So once again, our working directory is is the SLN. So we're going to make a folder right beside the SLN and call it assets. So it's going to look inside of assets, and then it's going to look inside of sounds. So we have to make a sounds folder. And you can throw in whatever old MP3 that you want in here. I'm going to throw in the old test Cash Money Man theme. Oops. So I'm just going to put test.mp3 in here. And yeah. So let's do this. Let's play a sound. And again, I'll go a little bit more in depth on how this works in a little bit. But to play a sound, we just need to make an fmod, or sorry, a Tonefire core sound, and we just have to give it a name, obviously, and provide it the file path. So let's call our sound test sound, and I'm going to call the constructor here and pass in test.mp3. Now, again, it's very important that you update this every frame. So it's very important that you update this every frame. I realize I'm going to have to cut that part from the recording. That's fine. It's very important that you update this every frame, because otherwise there's going to be like buildup of unused resources from fmod, and it's not going to be nice on your memory usage. One second, I'm just going to drink a bit of water. I've been talking a lot. So with this part sort of being over, as in the first part of the session sort of being over, I just want to make sure, does anybody have any questions on how this works, or, you know, steps that they missed? Oh, yeah, you know, I didn't actually call play, but we'll do that in a second. How long is the session going to be? We'll probably stop at like 6:15, 6:20. So they're usually an hour and a half long. It shouldn't be too much longer. Yeah, I realize this is kind of an info dump, but that's the reason why we're recording this in the first place. Okay, so you missed the additional include directories. Okay. So you want to right click, sorry, I'll do that slower. Right click on your properties here, go down project, right click on your project, go down to properties, click on that, it'll open this window up. And then for that, for additional include directories, you're going to click on C++ and general. And then up here right at the top, you're just going to put /include. That's the additional includes thing. All good? Okay, I'm going to assume that, yeah, okay, cool. So, sorry, I got interrupted in my train of thought earlier, so let's just finish what's going on here. Test sound.play. Cool. So if I run this and then share my window with you guys, you should be able to hear sound. Awesome. It's playing a sound. Cash money, man. So that's cool. Now let's get into the second sort of portion in this session. But before I do, I'm just going to quickly recap everything that you need to do. It's pretty simple, but I will recap nonetheless. So you're going to make sure that the include directory is set up and that you have your includes in the proper place. So you want tonefire.h and fmod in its own subfolder inside of your include directory. And it should look something like this. You should be able to include tonefire/tonefire.h. Step 2. Make sure that you link your library. So for us, we're only worrying about debug mode right now. So make sure you make your lib folder, your debug subfolder, and you slap in your tonefire.lib in there. And then for that, once again, make sure your directories are set up correctly. So remember, additional library directories here under general and linker is going to be /debug. And then the next part to link statically is the input. You're going to go here to the additional dependencies, click edit, add tonefire.lib. Make sure it's tone spacefire. I made that mistake myself. And then the last thing to do is dynamically link. So again, make sure that you grab your DLLs 1, 2, and 3, and you put them next to your exe in your build directory. So we can see here are our DLLs, those 3, and that's it. That's a summary of what we just did. So let's talk about Studio. Because I have not talked about Studio yet. So I'm not going to go over how this all works at the moment. I'll do that after I do Studio, again, for those who are interested. So Studio works kind of similarly, but with that, you know, we need to use a little bit more advanced stuff. We're going to be using FMOD Studio, which means we're not going to be having, you know, WAV files and such. We're not going to be worrying about that. So to show this off, I will now comment out this again and uncomment this. So, it's very similar. Tone Fire, yes, they're very similar, or familiar rather. So, Tone Fire FMOD Studio is the underlying audio engine, and this is where you load your banks. And again, if you're completely lost in what I'm talking about, go ahead and watch some GSC recordings on middleware and such, and you'll figure it out. But they're basically these sound files that have a bunch of different sounds packed into them. And it lets you be really robust with what you want to do. So, we load our banks into here. And we're going to also load master.strings.bank. This is so that we don't have to use like 40 character long GUIDs. That's gross. This allows us to do things like this, where we can just pass in event Ghoul 23 Hurt. And we're going to load our other bank, Ghoul.bank. Now for test, which is a studio sound. We're going to load the events, which is 23 Hurt and 22 Spotted. You can set the position of the event, and in FMOD Core, you can also set the position of the listener. Studio, you can set the position of the listener. We'll go over that later because I don't assume that you guys are going to use that if you're in first year. And of course, we can play the event. Just get rid of this here. So, I will run, or I can run this and I can show you guys, but it's a little hard to do because when I tell it to play the event, it's going to play it too fast. So I'm going to try and make it into a loop, see if that actually works properly. Normally when you have things that loop, there's parameters for it, and you don't have to mess with it like this. Yeah, it's not liking that I'm trying to play it every frame. But yeah, I promise you this works. I made sure. Yep, works just fine. All right. Okay, so we're gonna move on to how to set this up again in your own C++ project. Again, once you have the libraries linked and all that, this is not going to be a problem. And lucky for us, we've already got them linked. So, you know, let's just ditch this FMOD core stuff for a second. And we're going to leave that there because I'm going to call it the same thing. So Tone Fire Studio, FMOD Studio, FMOD. And let's see. You know, I think I will use the stuff we did from Tuesday. I've got it downloaded already. If you don't know what I'm talking about, head over to the GSC server and go into announcements. Carter posted this. It's a little project. And yeah. So let me just make sure that the default path is, yep. All right. So we're going to extract our FMOD project here. You do not need to have your FMOD project in your game, but I'm just going to extract it here because Carter included the whole project. All you need from this are a couple of things. First, you need to go into the build folder, desktop, and grab these three banks. So this is your master.strings, masters, or master, and the other banks that you might have with it. So you're going to grab these, you're going to copy them, and you're going to paste them. So the next thing that we're going to do, and this has nothing to do with Tone Fire, kind of is actually, I mean, I guess it really is, but I'm actually going to open this up in FMOD because what I'm about to do is going to be really useful for you guys. So again, if you don't know FMOD Studio or anything like that, I recommend going and watching GSC videos. We have tons of content on this stuff. And if you're interested, you definitely have a great chance at making some great audio for your game. So we're going to go to File here, and we're going to export GUIDs. And what this is going to do is it's going to generate a little text file for us in the build folder. And this might look familiar to my example. We have an event called music and a parameter called tension. If you were there for Tuesday, then you probably remember what this does. And we also have these disgusting GUIDs. But we're not going to pay attention to those. So for now, we're going to leave this file open. Okay. So now that we have our banks in there, let's go back to our C++ project and load them. So fmod.loadBank, and our bank is called master.bank. Bank. I can type. And then we're going to load it again, master.strings.bank. And then we're going to change this to music.bank. So great, our banks are loaded. Now let's get into the studio sound. So how do you use it? Well, you make an object like before, studio sound, and we're going to call it, I don't know, my sound. You don't need to give this a sound or anything. All you need to do is this, my sound dot load event. So this is where you're going to pass in those event names from the GUIDs. So I want to load the music event. So to do that, I just pass it into this function. Bam. Cool, our event's been loaded. Now to play the event, it's just as simple. My sound dot play event, and we're going to pass in the same string. Now the reason why it's like this is so that you can have multiple events loaded into the same object. You could change that if you want to, and I will get into how you could change or understand how this library works later. And I'm just going to check real quick that I haven't messed anything up. Yeah, looks fine. Okay, so cool. Our thing has been loaded and we can play it. So let's go ahead and do that. And here it is. It's a very spooky sound. Might be a little hard to hear at first. It comes in like right here. Yeah. All right. Awesome, we got FMOD Studio in our game. But you know, we're not really using the core functionality of FMOD Studio. There's so much more that we could do with this. And it's really simple. All we have to do to get access to that functionality is set event parameter. Now this is going to save your life, all right? You're going to pass in your event string here, which is event/music, event:/music. And we're going to pass in the name of the parameter. Now you may have seen this parameter here. And if you were there on Tuesday, you remember what this parameter does. When we increase it, it makes it so that the tension in the song increases. And we can play around with that how we want. We can set up trigger volumes to change the value. We can make it higher or lower. And this is a very powerful thing that lets you have very dynamic and adaptive music in your game. For example, if you walk into an enemy and you're going to be spooked, you probably want to set that tension up to the highest level, right? Or something like a jump scare. So let's pass that in, and we need to pass in a floating point. So we're going to pass in, I don't know, 4, right? So cool. What this is going to do is this is going to load the event, play the event, and tell it, hey, by the way, make sure you start at tension 4. And once it hits this update loop here, it will actually start playing that. So let's load it up. So, oops. So already you can hear the song is different. Before it started at the very somber beginning stuff. Now it's more like into like the mid section of the song. And again, you can do all sorts of things with this setup. You can have trigger volumes that change the parameter. And it will stay on that loop up until you change that parameter because of the way that we set it up in FMOD Studio. Now again, a lot of this stuff for FMOD Studio is dependent on how your sound designer has set it up. So make sure that if you have a sound person on your team, if you're interested in sound and you want to do it right, watch GSC videos, come to our sessions. You'll learn a lot. Okay, we're going to close FMOD real quick. Okay, so this is officially the end of part 1 to the session. So everything after now is going to be information for you if you're interested. If you just wanted to know how to get this into your game, now's the time to leave. But if you want to know how Tone Fire works and consequentially how FMOD works, I'm going to explain it. And I'm also going to take a second to drink some water. And yeah, for those of you who want to head out, I would really like to thank you for coming because, as we all know, sound is a very important thing in games. And part of the reason why we made Game Sound Club is because we were, a little dissatisfied with how much support there is in the program. And this is something that is very near and dear to my heart, that you guys are going to be able to put sound to your games properly. And again, it's not a requirement, but if you want your game to feel nice and sound nice, sound is going to help you a lot. So I hope this helped for anybody who is heading out. And I'm going to take another sip of water before I go into this explanation. Where are the recorded sessions for GPC? I will post this in announcements or make a channel. I'll figure it out. Will the remainder of the session also be recorded? Yes. But let's see. We are 37 minutes in-ish. So if you're watching this back, or if you wanted to know where it ends at 37 minutes. Cool. So let's get into the details. Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll post some session slides. I can post it in GSC if you want to. I'm sure me and Carter can figure that out later. So let's start with the basics here. How the hell did I make this? Well, I have a separate C++ project for this, and that might seem weird at first if you've never seen this kind of thing. Excuse me. Basically, what I wanted to do was make a very modular way to get sound into people's games. And one of the best ways to do that, like I mentioned before, is to make a library. So that's why I made a whole repo, made a dynamic link library, and all that jazz. And I'm gonna go over how it's done, but I'm not gonna go over how exactly it works because that's a whole other discussion. Well, let's start with the header. So for the people who are interested in 3D sound and such, the first thing that comes up is the listener. But before we get to that, I will mention these are the headers that you need to include for FMOD Core. This is for FMOD Studio. And this is the stuff that lets me do DLL stuff. So, and don't worry if you don't get this, but in my preprocessor here, it's somewhere. Where's my preprocessor? I always forget. There it is. Different options. Let's do x64. Yeah, okay. Cool. So in my preprocessor here, I've defined this macro, Tone Fire export. And in the code, it recognizes that. Now, when this macro is defined, it's going to define DLL as decal spec DLL export. And this basically just means, hey, send this as a definition to the DLL. And if it's not defined, it's going to import it, which if we look at this, we can see that since Tone Fire export is not defined, it's actually being imported, which is good. We want to import it because we're not exporting it. So let's go over the, I'll quickly gloss over the listener. It's a pretty simple class. All right, thanks, Rob. Thanks for coming. I love making noises. Everybody loves making noises. Everybody keep making noises. Okay, so this class is pretty simple. This is what lets you control your listener in 3D space. And is very simple. It's just, it assumes that your up vector is 1 and your forward vector is, or 1 on the Y and your forward vector is 1 on the Z. You can change those if you want. This is sort of just something to kind of help you manage your 3D sound. Now you'll see that it is friends with FMOD Core and Studio, and yeah, it works for Studio and Core. And you'll also see this macro everywhere. Like I said, this is from before. This is DeclSpec DLL export, and it's basically telling it to export this class. Now, I've always been kind of confused on where exactly this needs to go. I know it needs to go before like the classes you want to export, but what I don't understand is like, do I need this here? I'm just doing a foreign declaration. I feel like I don't. Anyway. Alright, so let's go over FMOD Core. So this is the wrapper for FMOD. This is the most important part for FMOD Core. Without this, you would not be able to get sounds. So yeah, pay attention if you're interested in wrapping this yourself. So FMOD is very C-like. It's very, it's 100% C compatible if I remember correctly. So with that, you're gonna see some weird shit. So strap in, fellows. You're gonna see some weird C shit. So the first thing is, in this constructor here, we're just defining the maximum number of sound channels we have, default path, the listener. These are all default arguments in the constructor. You don't have to worry about this. The first thing we want to do is create the system. Now this is a static method, or function, I believe anyway, from the FMOD namespace, and it's going to store the data of the system inside of this FMOD system pointer. And now this is something I've created in the header, which is right here. So this is an FMOD system pointer set to null pointer by default. Okay, and you're going to see a lot of this. You're going to see a lot of this double pointery stuff here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that very well. Here, that's not that much better. Okay, so this is a double pointer, but don't think of it that way. Think of it as the address of a pointer. This is a pointer. We're getting the address. Is a double pointer. The address of a pointer. Don't let that trip you up. Okay. Next thing is this error check function pops up everywhere. FMOD on their website is they're like, oh, you should make your own error check function to make sure that like if there's an error, it gets it properly and blah blah blah. So that pops up everywhere wherever there's an FMOD result. So set system software format. This is going to define the sample rate and the kind of speaker that you are using. So you can change this if you want. It's you got default, raw, mono, stereo, quad, surround 5.1, 7.1, blah blah blah. I just put stereo because I'm assuming people are using headphones. In my experience, I couldn't tell the difference, probably because I wasn't using speakers. Anyway, so we're going to initialize our thing here with our max channels and our initialize flag of nothing. And no extenuating data. That's what these parameters are. Max channels, initialization flags, and data, extra data. And we don't care about that, so And again, the reason why it's a void pointer is because it's C compatible. It can take any argument. You don't want to mess with this. You don't need to. I mean, unless you want to, but... Alright, I'll get back to this later, but here we're just making a list of empty channels, and we're setting up some basic FMOD listener stuff. So let's go over how sounds are created. So first thing, we have our file name, which is passed in via the constructor of the actual sound itself. And we have the flags for the system. One second, my headset's about to die, I just gotta plug it in. So by default, these flags are set to FMOD 2D. And that's just in this function here. You can choose to change this if you want. You can pass in FMOD 3D, FMOD loop, whatnot. And a little note on those flags, if you want a sound to loop, there is a constructor where you can pass in is it a stream, which means is it a big long file? Do you want it to loop? Is it 3D? You can also just use these. But again, if you want a sound to loop, I'll just show you real quick. I meant to actually show you this earlier, but that's my bad. So all you would do is just in your actual thing here, let's say you have a 2D sound and you want it to loop, you would do fmod loop normal. And this is just bitewise or this is wrong. Fmod loop normal. There we go. I thought maybe I spelled it wrong. But anyway. So fmod 2D or bitewise or with fmod loop normal, that will tell the system internally that you want it to be a 2D sound that loops. And I am pretty sure that you guys are familiar with this. So yeah. Again, there's a constructor for that. It's just terrible. I don't recommend you use it. Anyway. So we have our sound pointer here. It's set to null. And then we have this thing. So you can try and play files from the internet. Is it going to work? Probably not, because you need a very specific setup to get files from the internet to play sound. AKA, you need to have like a specific website that's like doing a specific thing. It's like, why bother? Just ship your sound with your game. I put a little bit of support in here for that. Does it work? I don't know. I couldn't figure out how to test it. But our path is equal to our default path plus our file name. And that's combined together to make a C string and pass it into this create function here. So again, this is a function that requires a double pointer. We pass in our flags, no extra info, and the double pointer, which is just the address of the sound. And we are going to check errors and stuff, and then just return that sound once we're done. So this gets returned to the actual constructor for the core sound. So this constructor here actually calls create sound, as you can see here. So that's how that works. And playing a sound. So again, this is this may look like a little bit of a mess, but this is just kind of extra stuff that you don't really need to do. If you want, you could, or if you want to see this all in like one file, I did actually make an extra example here of how FMOD is done in one file. But I'm more so going over my explanation here, or my implementation rather. So basically, let's go over this part first. So we're going to go ahead and get a free channel, which just looks through all the channels to see is it null pointer, is it being used, is it ready to be used, and once it's found that particular channel that we're looking for, it passes it into here. And once we're ready to play the sound, we play that particular sound. So we pass in a core sound here. We're going to access that sound pointer, pass in the channel, and play it. Now, one thing to note that I'm not sure why they've done this, but the way that FMOD works is that since the channels are null pointer, until you play a sound, you can't mess with the volume or anything to do with that channel before you've played a sound. So for example, if I were to call set volume on this channel, I couldn't actually set the volume on the channel until I've called play on the sound, which is whack, and I don't know why they did it that way, but they did. And the last thing for this is update. Okay, well, main thing, last thing is this. So we're setting our 3D listener attributes. This is for 3D sound if you want to do it. And we're updating, and that's it. And I'll skip down to here. Is channel playing? Just checks to see if a channel is playing. And now again, this looks whack. Bool playing equals false. Why are we doing this? Shouldn't we be able to just return a function? No, because it has to be weird and return a result. So we're just passing in the pointer to a bool here, and then we're returning that bool. So for example, I pass this in as false. If it's playing, it will set this to true because we're passing in the address of it, and it's going to return that, and it'll return the proper thing. And get free channel is just going to loop through our channels and check to see if any particular channel is null pointer, or if the channel that is in question is not playing anything. And if it's not, we're going to return that channel at that index, which is something similar to something that I wrote last year, and I remember that JJ found out that it was broken. So you know what? I'm inviting you, JJ. If this is broken, or if you somehow find out that this is broken, please let me know, because I will fix it. So yeah, now this works properly. We can clearly see if the channel is not playing, or if it's null pointer, then we should be using that channel. And now we're going to get into core sound. So we pretty much covered everything to do with core sound, because it actually is just the system under the hood. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over most of this. So again, play sound, we're passing in the core sound, which is just the this pointer. Set volume, get volume, etc. Mute the channel, is muted, unmute, is playing. You know, these are very self-explanatory functions. And then there's set sound position, where you can actually set the position of the sound in the world. Again, don't expect that people are going to use this if you're using FMOD core. If you're using 3D sound, you might as well go all the way and use FMOD Studio. And here is channel is null pointer, which is just checking to see if the channel is supposed to be playing, or if the channel is null pointer, or if it's broken. If we're in debug mode, it's going to print out this little error message here. And it's going to say what I've said before. Be sure to play to initialize the channel before you attempt to modify it. So do not call mute or, you know, set volume on a channel that hasn't been played, because that will break it. And yeah, that's FMOD core. And again, I have this little main here that is how to use FMOD core in 51 lines. And if you guys want, I can post this in the chat if you want. Not too important, but yeah. That's if you want to wrap your own stuff. Okay, so last couple of mouthfuls are Studio Sound and FMOD Studio. So this is also just a little wrapper for the Studio side of FMOD. It has the same thing, max channels, a listener, and a default path. Remember, it has our load bank function, and it has some other stuff this stuff has not been implemented yet, and this has this is how we actually do stuff internally for getting the descriptions. For the most part, this part of the implementation is pretty simple. So actually, oopsie, there we go. So again, we're just creating our system. Very important here, very important note, do not make a core system and a studio system at the same time. So what I mean by that is do not have a Tone Fire FMOD core and a Tone Fire FMOD studio at the same time, because Tone Fire FMOD studio has an FMOD core instance under the hood, and that will mess things up. Okay, so we're doing the same thing, passing in the address of a pointer to fill that pointer with data, setting the software format, initializing all the stuff, and yeah, same thing as usual. And we're also setting the instance pointer here, which I didn't really mention before, but basically it just allows the other classes to access the system without it being messy. Okay, so load bank here is again a very simple function. For the most part, Studio is actually a much simpler and easier thing to work with on the code side. So we pass in our bank name and our flags and the actual pointer to the bank, well, address of the pointer to the bank, and it gives us our bank file. Well, actually it doesn't. What it does is it loads it into the system, and this makes it so that you can access the banks from anywhere you have access to the system, and this will be important for later. So that's why there are no bank classes or anything like that, because we don't need them. So get event description. If you remember from before, this is how we kind of set up the back end for the whole this like event thing, passing in this name. It will look and find this particular description of this event, and it will make an instance, but we'll talk about that later. So we have our event description here. Again, just passing it in as a C string and a pointer to it, and we're returning it. And this stuff, I was having some weird problems, so I ended up making this little variable here called attr for attributes, as an FMOD 3D attributes, and I just set everything equal and passed that in to the set listener attributes for each frame. This is important. If you don't have this, your 3D sound will not work. So make sure that when you're updating your system, that you set your 3D attributes or your listener attributes, and you call your system update. Now with that, let's move on to studio sound. So this is probably the part of the implementation that has the kind of the weirdest bit to it. A lot of you in first year probably haven't seen an unordered map before, but if you have, cool. Basically, let's make an example here. So I have, what's a good example of an ordered map? I should probably have thought of this ahead of time. Okay, let's say that you have a phone number, okay? And your phone number corresponds to your phone. And, you know, if you open up a phone book, it's got a list of phone numbers, right? But you don't actually see, you know, an image of the phone itself, or like you don't have access to every phone. You just have the phone number. So, you know, that's kind of the same thing that's going on with other maps. We have this string here, and this string is kind of like our phone number, and this is kind of like the actual phone itself. This is what we're going to be using for our data. So you pass in the string, and it will get you the data. And if you don't get that right now, don't worry about it. We'll go over it again in a sec. So let's go over what's going on here. So this is just a little cheese here that Daniel showed me, and I love to do now with any list. Just reserve space ahead of time. Saves on memory. Load event. This is where we're going to actually use get event description, and we're going to pass in the name of the event. So this this unordered map here, at this event name, remember, kind of like it's you open up the phone book, you look at that number. So the data under here, or at this particular name, is going to be set equal to whatever the return of this function is, which is an event description pointer. So the next time that I say, much like an array, the next time that I say bank event descriptions at event name, it's going to give me this pointer. All right, so the next thing, this again kind of looks a little ugly, but basically, sorry, I forgot to zoom in. Basically, we're going to, now that we have our event descriptions, create an event instance. And we're going to store that instance inside of our list of event instances at that particular name. Same thing as before. Now what this is going to allow us to do is be very readable with our code. So I can say, let's say my event is like events music, right? I can pass in events music and pass it into here, and it will know what that actually is. And once it finds that, it will call start on that event. So this is how you play events, by the way. It's just this function called start. You can also stop events, which is this function, and you can pass in special flags to make it like fade out or whatnot. Again, if your FMOD person has set this up correctly, if your sound person has set this up correctly, you should not be messing with this. Because if they wanted the sound to fade out, they would have made it fade out in FMOD. Is basically what, you know, their job is. And you're also going to see this sort of line of code appear a lot. This is basically a failsafe to make sure that, you know, oops, I forgot to load the event. It's going to load the event for you. And it's kind of the same thing for this. You know, we take our instance and we call set parameter by name. We pass in our event name. We pass in our parameter name and our parameter value. So the event name is going to be used in here to find the correct instance of the event. The parameter name is going to be put in here to be passed in to get the correct parameter. And parameter value is going to pass in, or is going to be passed in to represent the value that you want. And yeah, then you have set event position, which just takes an FMOD vector and an event name, and it sets the event instance to that particular place or velocity and such. But I only pass in position here. So it sets that event at a particular place in 3D space that you specify, and that's it. And that's really it. That's the end of the implementation. So yeah, that is both implementations done and explained. I realized that I probably went really fast or something. So again, you can either watch the video or you can ask me questions directly. I'm always open to answer them. And I am really hoping that you guys put some sounds into your games this year, because that would be great. And yeah. If you guys want me to post how to use FMOD core in one file, I'll post that in the chat. If not, then I will probably end the recording here unless we have any questions from the people who are still here. No problem. Yeah, it is well, Carter, who you guys cannot hear in the recording because I have my desktop sound muted because I was listening to this thing. Well, if you want to go to Game Sound Club, go into the Discord. I believe we posted the link already. If you're interested in this stuff, less from a programming perspective and more from like a theoretical and you know, sort of making the sounds and such. If you're interested in that, go to Game Sound Club, go to our sessions, and also watch the recordings. We have loads of recordings, and you'll be able to learn a lot about game sound. even ahead of time of your second year course. Or if you're in second year right now, you'll learn even more. Or, you know, even if you're not in first or second year, you're going to learn a lot by watching those videos. Carter does a really good job of explaining things and going really in depth. So,
Well, thank you.
no problem. Okay. Do we have any other questions? No problem. Okay, well, if anybody is watching this or here right now with me or anything like that, and you find any issues with Tone Fire, let me know, and I will try my best to fix them. And if you have any suggestions or anything, feel free to leave suggestions on the repo. I believe there are some already in there if you want to take a look at those. But let's just open it up to see. I think it's in discussions or is it in issues? Oh yeah, okay. So if you want to make a suggestion to me, make a new issue, and I will take a look and see if I agree with you or not. I probably will. There's ways that this can improve, definitely. But just don't pull an Emery and say that I don't have an error check function, which no shade against him. It was just funny that he didn't actually see that I did. But yeah, make sure that when you make an issue, it's either about a bug or a suggestion. Suggestion, maybe make it so that you don't need to type event or parameter for convenience. Yeah, I could do that. Is it easy to switch your game from core to studio? Yeah. All you need to do is just, you know, let's see. All you need to do is, I don't know, let's say I have my core stuff here. It's like, you know, core, I have my core, blah, blah, blah. I have my sound and stuff. Just instead of using this, just replace it with this system. And instead of using core sounds, use studio sounds. It should not be too much of a change. Unless you've created wrappers and stuff, then in that case, that's out of my hands. Suggestion, I think you mean concatenate, auto concatenate dot bank to the load bank function. Okay. Also make a load bank function that concatenates dot strings dot bank to load the dot strings file in one function. I would do that, but there's only one strings bank, and you're not always going to have the strings bank. Both bank files as an option. Okay. Yeah, okay, I could do something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like these are good suggestions. But what I mean is like, you know, for example, right now, something that I don't particularly like about my code right now is that if I do this, Tone Fire studio sound, my sound 2. If I do this and I say my sound 2 dot, well, I mean, this is a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. If I say play event, music, this will work and that's fine. Well, not with 2 dots. This will work and that's fine. But basically, it's not always the best because it's going to create a whole new instance of this event, which is good and bad because basically it means you can access these events from anywhere. Like if this sound was like, I don't know, music, right? And this sound is like SFX, right? And I could do like event slash SFX, and it would work here. The thing is, it's just kind of a fault of FMOD Studio API itself. So no global event tracker, basically. Yeah, it would be nice if you could do that. But again, since we're actually loading them into the system itself and everything depends on that, everything kind of has access to everything else. Which, you know, is more of a code standards thing rather than an actually practically, you know, annoying thing. Nevertheless, things to note. Yeah, that's true. I could definitely, like, you know, you could make wrappers, like I made a wrapper for the gamepad manager here, where it's kind of simplified, so that you don't really need to worry about player numbers or anything like that. You know, you don't need to worry about, like, which gamepad it is or, like, the input event system. You can totally make wrappers for things in Tone Fire. That's the beautiful thing, is that if you want to change it, you can. And yeah, I could definitely make like a wrapper or just change the implementation of myself to somehow stop, you know, being able to play any event from anywhere. But yeah. Yeah. That is true. It is impossible to make 100% something 100% generic. That's why programmers exist. I stumbled through that sentence. Okay, I'm going to end the recording. Thanks for watching. And for those of you who came to the session, thanks for listening. I hope this helped. And yeah, go put sound in your games. So yeah, recording